All right, everyone, let's talk about our future. When we think about sustainable energy, what comes to mind? Probably wind turbines, solar panels, electric cars, right? It seems so simple, but what if it's not? What if the very solutions we're counting on create their own massive problems? That's exactly what we're going to dig into today. We're going to go on a critical journey to uncover the complex and sometimes hidden challenges of this so-called green transition. Okay, let's just start with this. Take a second to read this quote from someone living in rural Canada. It's million-dollar views littered with giant windmills that blink red all night long. Wow. That one sentence just hits you, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the tension at the heart of what we're talking about. You've got this promise of clean energy, but then there's the harsh reality for the people who actually have to live with it. A solution for the world can feel like a real problem for your community. So, to really get a handle on this, we're going to use the tools from our AMC course. This whole topic fits perfectly into our theme 2, Environnement sans mutation, and more specifically, Axis 2, Défis environnementaux. Using this framework helps us look past the simple headlines and really understand how the English-speaking world is wrestling with these massive problems. And, this is exactly the kind of critical thinking you'll need for the baccalaureate.
Okay, so here's the big question that's going to guide us through this whole explainer. We're going to tackle it in 3 main parts. Think of it as a journey. First, we'll stop in a small town in Canada and really listen to what the local community has to say. Then we're off to the big city, New York, to see how they're trying to force change through policy. And for our final stop, we'll zoom way out to get a global perspective and uncover some of the hidden costs of going green.
All right, first stop, Canada. Our first big challenge is all about social acceptance. You can have the best technology in the world, but if people don't want it in their backyard, you've got a problem. Researchers went in and actually talked to people, running focus groups to get a sense of how they really feel. And what they found was fascinating. The biggest roadblocks weren't about engineering or science. They were about people. And just look at what they found. This really breaks it down. We often hear this vague term, local opposition. But what does that actually mean? Well, for the people in Pincher Creek, it means their beautiful landscape is now, in their words, littered with windmills. It's the constant noise, those blinking red lights all night. It's watching your farmland get torn up for an energy project that you feel you get zero benefit from. But maybe the biggest thing of all is that feeling of distrust. That sense of, sure, you'll listen to us, but you're just going to do what you want anyway. That's a powerful feeling. And that feeling, that sense of being completely ignored, that brings us to a really important concept for your analysis: procedural justice. This is a key one, guys. It's not about whether you like the final decision or not. It's about whether you felt the process of getting there was fair. Did you actually have a voice? Did you feel like what you said mattered, or could it change anything? For the folks in Pincher Creek, the answer was a clear no. And when that happens, any trust that was there, it just vanishes. And that flows right into our next key concept, distributive justice. If procedural justice is about the how, distributive justice is about the what. It's all about fairness in who pays the price and who gets the goodies. Think about it. The residents of Pincher Creek are definitely paying the costs, right? The ruined view, the noise, the land disruption. But who's getting the benefits? It's that imbalance, that feeling that it's just not fair, that fuels so much of this conflict. So it turns out we all think about fairness in a few different ways. The research breaks it down into 3 types. First, there's the intrapersonal level. That's the super personal stuff. How is this going to affect me? Am I going to be worse off financially? Then you zoom out a little to the interpersonal level. You start comparing. Okay, how does this affect me compared to my neighbors? Is that town over there getting a better deal? And finally, there's the big one, intergenerational fairness. This is when we ask the huge questions like, are the decisions we're making right now fair to future generations? Are we protecting the planet for them? Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's compare what we saw in Canada with a big study from New Zealand. So in Canada, with those small, in-depth focus groups, the number one issue was procedural justice, that feeling of being heard. But in New Zealand, they did a huge survey asking lots of people, and they found the biggest factor for acceptance was totally different. It was all about perceived benefit. Basically, if people believe that a renewable energy project will create jobs, save them money, or even make them feel proud of their country, they are way more likely to support it. 2 different countries, 2 very different angles. Okay, so we've seen how tough it can be to win over local communities. It's all about listening, about fairness, but what happens when you take a completely different approach? What if, instead of trying to persuade people, you just force them? For that, we're heading to our second stop, New York City. Now, you might think in a city like New York, the biggest problem would be traffic, right? All those yellow cabs.
But actually, because so many people use public transport, the number one source of greenhouse gas emissions isn't cars. It's the buildings, the skyscrapers, the apartment blocks, all of it. So they came up with this really aggressive policy called Local Law 97. And its goal is simple, to force big buildings to clean up their acts and become way more energy efficient.
And when I say aggressive, I mean it. The first major target is absolutely huge, a mandatory 40% reduction in emissions by 2030. And let's be super clear here. This is not a friendly suggestion or voluntary program. This is the law. If building owners don't comply, they face massive financial penalties. It's a real get it done or else approach.
Now, they're not just flipping a switch overnight. The law is being rolled out in phases to give people time to adapt. The first compliance period has already started, and there's a bit of flexibility for good faith efforts, but don't be mistaken, those deadlines are set in stone. The final goal is a mind-boggling 80% reduction by 2050. It's a completely top-down approach, which is such a sharp contrast to the bottom-up, community-focused issues we just saw in Canada, isn't it? Okay, so we've looked at the local level, a small town. We've looked at the city level, a huge metropolis. For our third and final challenge, we need to zoom all the way out and look at the global reality. Because all these green technologies we're banking on, solar panels, EV batteries, you name it, they don't just appear out of thin air. They rely on incredibly complex global supply chains. And when you start pulling at those threads, a whole new can of worms opens. This chart right here just says it all. It shows you the sheer scale of the challenge. Take a look. A normal, conventional car needs about 33 kilograms of key minerals. Now look at the electric vehicle, over 200 kilograms. That is 6 times more. 6! It's a stark reminder that this energy transition isn't some clean, abstract thing. It is incredibly hungry for raw materials. And this creates a really tragic paradox, something experts call the resource curse. Let's take the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or the DRC. They produce over 70% of the world's cobalt, which is absolutely essential for the batteries in our phones and electric cars. Now, you'd think this mineral wealth would be amazing for the country, right? It should mean jobs, investment, growth, but so often that's not what happens. Because of political instability, weak government, and horrible human rights abuses, including child labor, that potential is just wasted. It's a hard truth. Our clean energy can come at an unbelievably high human cost somewhere else in the world.
All right, another huge global problem is a purely economic one. As we make this big shift to renewables, what do we do with all the old stuff? All the coal power plants, the oil reserves, the pipelines that are already built. These become what economists call stranded assets. Basically, they lose their value way sooner than planned. The best way to think about it is like this. Imagine you have a perfectly good car, but suddenly a new law says you can't drive it anymore. It becomes worthless overnight. That's a stranded asset. And the total value of these assets around the world, it's a number that's almost hard to comprehend. $1.4 trillion. That's a T. It's a potentially massive, massive loss for investors, for companies, for entire economies. Now, to be fair, it's important to mention that some economists think the global financial system is flexible enough to handle this, that it can absorb the shock over time. But still, that is a huge number to absorb. Okay, and for our last global challenge, we have to talk about something a bit more sneaky. It's called greenwashing. You've probably heard of it. It's when a company spends a fortune on ads telling you how green and eco-friendly they are, but in reality, they're not really doing much to change. It's all style, no substance. All sizzle, no steak. The appearance of sustainability without the real-world action. And listen, this isn't just a little PR problem anymore. The days of getting away with it might be numbered. Greenwashing is now starting to have real, painful financial consequences. I mean, look at this example. A major bank's investment arm getting hit with a €25 million fine for misleading people. Regulators are finally starting to crack down. The era of just making empty promises and hoping nobody notices, well, it might just be coming to an end. All right, let's pull it all back together. We've been on quite a journey, haven't we? From a small town in Alberta to the massive skyscrapers of New York, all the way to a cobalt mine in the DRC. So what's the big takeaway? How do we answer that guiding question we started with? I think the most important thing to realize is this. There is no simple fix. There's no magic wand, no silver bullet solution. We can't just invent our way out of this with technology. A truly sustainable future is going to require an incredibly delicate balance. It needs that social justice, that fairness that the people in Pincher Creek are asking for.
It needs the kind of bold, decisive policy we're seeing in New York. And crucially, it needs a real, honest commitment to fixing the massive injustices that are baked into our global supply chains. And so I want to leave you with one final question to think about, a question for you to carry with you. As you go out into the world, you're going to be bombarded with promises of a greener future, with green logos on everything. The single most important skill you can have is critical thinking. So the question is, how will you, as future citizens, learn to separate the real, genuine solutions from just clever marketing? How will you spot the ideas that are truly making the world better for everyone? That's something to think about. Thanks for listening.